Hi, I'm Belle Holder, the host of UNCTAD Conversations. Today we're at Colony Club by Elegant Hotels, which is located on Barbados' Platinum Coast. One of the special features of the Colony Club is its rum vault, which features rum from all over the world, but of course features Barbadian rum. And you know that Barbados is the country that invented rum. If you come to Barbados and you have the opportunity to come to the Colony Club, you can dine. You can have a special feature dining experience right here in the rum vault, and you'll be able to sample specialty rums from all over the world. We have some other bragging rights here in Barbados as well. Barbados is the first small island developing state to host UNCTAD, and also the smallest state to ever do so, and the first Caribbean state to do so as well. It's a big deal. Today's UNCTAD conversation, we're going to be talking to one of the individuals who had a hand in that negotiation to make sure that UNCTAD 15 is being hosted right here in Barbados. Up next is our conversation with Senator Dr. Jerome Walcott. Thank you so much for taking the opportunity to sit down with us. I think it's safe for us to demask at this distance.
Thank you. Thank you too, Belle. It's certainly my pleasure to be here this morning.
Thank you so much. You know, one of the things I emphasized at the top of the show is this unique opportunity that Barbados, I don't know if to say won is the right word, but when you bid for something, you win. And I really want to emphasize to every Barbadian how special that is, that this little island has a distinction of being a first when it comes to UNCTAD, and you were a part of that process. So I really want to start by emphasizing that to every Barbadian. What do you say?
You're absolutely correct. And I don't believe that the average Barbadian understands how significant it is for Barbados. UNCTAD, which was established in 1964, now has about 195 member countries. In June 2019, these countries voted unanimously for Barbados to be the location for the 15th UNCTAD conference. It's the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. And this is the 15th. This is the first time that UNCTAD is being held outside of a large country. I mean, for argument's sake, it was held in South America, in Brazil, Chile, and Colombia. Never in the Central America or the Caribbean. It's been held in Africa, it's been held in Ghana, in South Africa, indeed in Kenya twice. It's been held in the United Arab Emirates, Geneva twice. It's been held in India. It's been held in Bangkok, Thailand, and indeed Philippines. So this is the first time it is being held in Central America. It is the first time it is being held in a small island developing state. And indeed, it is being held in the smallest country it's ever been held in, which is Barbados. So these are three firsts for Barbados. We anticipated back in 2019 that we would have several thousand people here. We were working with about 4,000 to 5,000 persons would visit Barbados for this UNCTAD 15. As you're aware, it had to be rescheduled twice because of the occurrence of the pandemic. It was initially to be held last October. We then shifted it to April this year, and again we had to make a decision finally that you can't continue shifting it. And with the global situation where persons were meeting virtually, that this would be another first, and this would be the first time UNCTAD will be convened in a virtual format. So this brings an additional first to Barbados. There will be some persons coming into Barbados, significant individuals. I believe the president of Kenya has agreed to come. He is the outgoing chair, and he will be coming to hand over to Prime Minister Mia Mottley. In addition, we expect the Secretary General of UNCTAD to be here, and indeed the Secretary General of the UN to be also here. And of course, they will have additional persons coming with them. And we expect some leaders from the Caribbean. So we will not have the numbers that we anticipated, but Barbados will be on the world stage. And I spoke about 4,000 people coming, but now utilizing the technology and having a virtual meeting, it spreads it that much further, where thousands now, hundreds of thousands can now view. And UNCTAD is not meant to advertise Barbados or to sell Barbados, but certainly in terms of the platform being set up for the various aspects of the meeting, parts of Barbados's beautiful scenery would be highlighted, products that are made in Barbados, and indeed in some of the islands of the Caribbean will be highlighted. And there are very interesting fora that will take place before UNCTAD, highlighting things like youth problems related to youth, the Global Commodities Forum, one dealing with gender and development, another one dealing with civil societies, which that is one that we've been really working very hard with, and you would understand and appreciate with civil societies, the different diverse groups. And then there's a very interesting one where we have combined the creative industries with digitization of trade, to be a very interesting concept. And all of these are going to be, on the virtual and the media for thousands of people to participate. So Barbados can really benefit in terms of the historical significance of the conference. And I mentioned the 4 firsts for Barbados. And indeed, for the world, so to speak, to see Barbados, what is going on in Barbados, and that we are indeed, although a small island, are on the global stage as it relates to trade and development issues.
Yeah, I want the ordinary Barbadians to understand the impact that it has. What I don't want is for Barbadians to feel like it is this huge conference is happening, up here for certain people in suits, and it's not for me. Can you impress upon Barbadians how this impacts on our day-to-day lives?
Certainly. It is regrettable, as you said, because when it was being held here in person, we had established we'd go into the problem of highlighting an area, and you might be aware, which was going to be called the Bajan Village, across from the LASC, where there will be things depicting the vernacular of Barbados as relate to the rum shops, the bars, etc., and for Barbadians to come and display their things. In spite of that, now having the sort of virtual showcase for these things, it still allows Barbadians who are into the productive sector to display things that they're doing in Barbados. And this can help in terms of giving small and medium-sized enterprises an opportunity to be seen. It gives us an opportunity to play a role as it relates to our issues as a small island developing state, and certainly vulnerable to exogenous shocks as it occurs in climate change, the volcano next door, things like this. And it certainly, I said, it is difficult for me to quantify it, but certainly the ordinary Barbadian would benefit in the long run from spin-offs, be it in terms of those who are into industry, production, small enterprises, and certainly those who are in the tourist sector, who eventually, when people see the beautiful video, you've heard the jingle, which is captivating already. Persons will have that interest in coming to Barbados, and in that effect, we will benefit, not today or till next month, but in the long run.
So certainly, the conference is larger than just the event of the conference, but rather, what are some of those ideas shared and changes to be made? So how do we move then from idea stage to execution to make sure that some of those goals that we definitely need to achieve in Barbados, and then of course on the world scale, are achievable?
Well, there are 2 sets, as you said, there are 2 components. There's the conference, the business set,
Yes.
the session, where you have the outcome document and the political declaration and all of the parties talking. But importantly, these fora, where a lot of Barbadians are participating in, and indeed I've seen some of the recordings of some of the presentations, and they speak to follow-ups, not only setting goals, but follow-up, not that it ends here. And I think this was a criticism that former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Owen Arthur, made when we had discussions, because he was initially part to be chairing a commission, a special commission for this, that unfortunately he passed. But he was making the point that historically, when he looked at UNCTAD, there were a number of decisions, and when you look later on, not a number of these things were followed on. So you make an important point, and the fora allow that. And indeed, the last one that I mentioned, dealing with digital trade and creative industries, goes further in that it has workshops, in spite of the limitations, where young Barbadians have an opportunity, and they'll be looking at things like cybersecurity, robotics, this sort of thing, artificial intelligence, where young Barbadians can actually get hands-on experience. Of course, virtually those who are not here will be able to participate by watching it. But it gives that to us, and they, as I said, in all of these fora, they speak about after and the follow-on plan.
COVID has presented lots of challenges, but there's sometimes the most challenges forces you to make some positive steps and bolder steps in a way. So how do you view COVID from that perspective, that it forces us in many ways to know now how to be more resilient in so many ways?
Absolutely, I agree with you. I gave a speech a couple of weeks ago where I spoke about the good things that have happened as a result of COVID. There are actually some good things, and you're onto it. I look at the whole, we have now started to look again at the importance of digital transactions and e-commerce. We've been able to order things, sell things, without going physically to anything. We've been able to do meetings where we can see each other and speak. We can't touch, but certainly we can argue, we can have meetings for long periods of time. So it allows us to do things like that. It allows us to look at the world differently. And we have modified our behavior, and in some ways very good. I mean, I'm not going to say that wearing masks all the time is a good modification, right, but there are definitely positive spin-offs. And we've been robbed for a year because normally it's a quadrennial. So Barbados would normally have been in the chair, the Prime Minister of Barbados, from October 2020 to October 2024. We have 3 years, and we have 3 years that we really have to make a mark and ensure that Barbados's message and our role as we play in terms of the SIDS group is heard, and that we carry forward our message, especially in Geneva, where a lot of the pushing and heavy work is done.
All right, so we're going to continue our UNCTAD conversation right after this with Senator Dr. Jerome Walcott. We'll be right back. I think one of the things that would be remiss of me if we don't touch on today, having this opportunity to have this conversation, is to talk about the work of your ministry. And one of the things is friendship and cooperation between Barbados and other countries. Give us a sense of what that is like and what it actually entails to foster those relationships.
You said I have 10 minutes? Really, it is remarkable. I mean, it is based fundamentally, we still carry the tenet from the Right Excellent Arbar, friends of all, satellites of none. But in more recent times, I think you would appreciate that the world has evolved. There are several countries. At one time, we paid attention primarily to the Western Europe, North America, primarily. That was our world and CARICOM. We believe that the world is more than that, certainly at this stage. We see Africa and its potential. We have historical and cultural links with Africa. So we saw that as a focus for us. We see Central America as an area. It might be far-fetched, see Barbados at some point in time in the future, we might not be here, but being a sort of transshipment point, a hub between Africa and Central America and indeed South America. Did we see that? We see a unique location in the Atlantic Ocean, just east of the other islands in the Caribbean. So we are seeing that. Obviously, China is the one that people are focused on. There have been questions asked about our relationship with China. But the reality is, whether we choose to believe it or not, that there are two real superpowers in the world today. If we are friends of all and satellites of none, obviously we have to have relationships with both of those superpowers. It is in our interest. And at the end of the day, the Barbadian foreign policy has to do with the development of Barbadians and Barbados. And we have, as I often tell people, we have to read the fine print in these agreements, but we also have to be mindful of our role. That we are at the end of the day looking for the development of Barbados and Barbadians. End of story. We move the importance we recognize, and this is recognized, of the Middle East. So we have moved into United Arab Emirates. Our ambassador is there. We also recognize the importance of some of the countries in Eastern Europe. They have done a lot as it relates to information technology. You're aware of this, a lot of work that's been done in Serbia, in countries like Georgia. We hear about Estonia, but in the Eastern European countries, they have done a lot of very good work. And of course, there's the Southeastern Asia, where we plan with our ambassador, who has been now accredited to China, to Beijing. He has responsibility to be accredited also to Thailand, to Singapore, to Hong Kong, and indeed to Vietnam and Cambodia, because we see these countries also being in our interest. For years, we've been in the hub with the Commonwealth countries, but we see this as an opportunity for Barbados to branch off, create new friends. We said friends of all, but our friends tend to be limited. So now we're broadening that. Okay? And certainly in the region, you've seen our outreach to Suriname, where for a number of years, it was as though Suriname was an extra digit in CARICOM. And we have seen the potential in Suriname, certainly for Barbadians and certainly in terms of trade.
Right. Because a part of your ministry is also looking at the interests of nationals living abroad,
diaspora, yeah.
people who are studying abroad and returning nationals. Tell us about that.
We call it the diaspora affairs, and recently we've set up a diaspora unit because we felt that for years some Barbadians in various parts were complaining that they were being neglected. You have missions abroad, you have the consulates in New York, in Canada, in Miami, in London. So, to handle matters, because the diaspora is very important. As you said, oftentimes they have the skills that they've developed over years, certainly in the health sector, we've benefited from that. A lot of them have done very well, and we have not yet tapped the amount of Barbadians who have done very well overseas and who we need to encourage and entice in coming back home even, and to invest some of what they've made overseas into their native land. So this unit, we have set up the unit now, properly a unit. You would have seen in the news that we've appointed our first diasporic attaché to London, because we started there because there's a really strong Barbadian community there, and a lot of them have done well. And we recognize, as you said, it is very important. We are trying to get our honorary consuls in the various other countries where we don't have missions for us to put together the database in terms of Barbadians all across the world. And it'd be amazing if you saw some places where Barbadians have been working. I recently had an honorary consul who'd been living in Tokyo for a number of years, and we really didn't know, and doing quite well. So it is certainly a resource, I'll call it that we have the Ministry of Foreign Affairs recognize the importance of it. We recognize it also, and certainly when I was Minister of Health, in the health services, and the Barbadians, hundreds, thousands who've been trained in health services, be it nursing, be it administration, who were willing to play a part. And we utilized some of them as consultants at that time, some were employed. And I'm also looking at the fact, because I know a lot of Barbadians have done very well in the technological aspects, and this is an area where we need to move in. And I think it's going to be highlighted in UNCTAD, certainly, but the world has gone through a digital transformation technologically. It is a phenomenon that has occurred over the last few decades. But in developing countries, you have a number of things against you. You tend not to have the resources for the connectivity, etc. Not in terms of Barbados, but in certain other developing countries, the issues of short electricity, the issues of persons who are trained with these technical skills. And if we can get some of our Barbadians who have done very well in technology to come back home or to come and impart some of their skills in some training, I think we would have done very well.
All right. Really enjoying this conversation. When we come back, we're going to hear more from Senator Dr. Jerome Walcott. So we're continuing our conversation, and we were talking about harnessing the power, because that's truly what it is, of Barbadians living all over the world doing wonderful things. And I know, when we talk about Barbadian achievement abroad, like people will talk about Rihanna right away, but because it's entertainment, so it's on a different platform and it's visible, in so many ways. But then there's so many people doing wonderful work, as you mentioned, in so many other industries. But you raised an interesting point as we were chatting during the break about generational Barbadians now. In my experience, I find that often first generation Canadians, Americans are often not that interested in returning to the island. You may have had a different experience.
What I found in the United Kingdom, we had a massive town hall meeting 2 years ago. And you said the first generation, and when I studied in Edinburgh decades ago, and I would encounter first generation Barbadians, Jamaicans in Birmingham. You'd go there sometimes, and what you're saying is true. But what we found remarkable at this town hall was that this was the grandchildren now, were somehow interested in this country called Barbados.
Right.
I guess generated to some part by Rihanna. But they came and asked questions about how can they get Barbadian citizenship. So we thought that was an interesting thing. I take your point. The first generation, they're here, they come and visit, they go back.
Right.
But it seems as though their children now seem to have an interest. I don't know why. I guess younger people are more adventurous and willing to take risks. whereas the first generation...
Perhaps through the technology makes us closer, and I think what we need to emphasize to our children is that you can live and work in Barbados internationally. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's something that we need to really emphasize and create global citizens.
And that's what we did in a different way, certainly last year, in the Welcome Stamp, where we invited non-Barbadians, or even some Barbadians came, I can tell you that quietly, that some came, who were concerned about, the returning national scheme, having come home for 12 months to the lockdown, how would this affect their eligibility? And we've made a decision, more or less, that we will have to consider this time as a different period. You can't really say that if you came home in a COVID pandemic, because nothing was happening where you were, you came to work remotely, that you should be excluded. Yeah. So that put us in a different light, where people recognize that you can work. And certainly here, persons are working from home, not necessarily all of them as efficiently as you would want, but it's shown you that you can do things at home. And I guess that's one of the positives of COVID. In the long run, I know persons are concerned in the future with COVID has shown how business can be run virtually. What will happen in terms of employment? I know this is something, and I've been reading about it recently, that persons are certainly very concerned. COVID has started it, but with the vast technological advances in coming years and the use of robotics, there's a whole new game as it relates to labor issues and work-related issues. And I know that some people are thinking as far as ahead, as saying that some people who perform certain jobs, in the long run, you may have to be giving them grants, similar to what we did during the lockdown for very vulnerable families, because with the technological advances, a lot of jobs will become not existent.
For Barbadians who are living abroad, who are watching and listening to us right now, what advice can you give them if they're thinking, I would love the opportunity to invest in my native country? What do they do? What advice do you have? What steps should they be taking?
Sir, the Party Diaspora unit, we have links with Invest Barbados. And this is something that we are looking at. How do we get Barbadians interested? They can contact the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
And we're talking more than just, sending back which I definitely grew up on. You see what I mean? In sending back money to support.
I know the remittances are very important, of course, the remittances. But we're thinking in the long term of persons who want to invest. And we're doing this in conjunction with Invest Barbados. And they can contact the ministry. But certainly there is a portfolio. I know Invest Barbados have opportunities in various areas where you're welcoming Barbadians to invest. And actually, you would like Barbadians to invest in some of the projects. There's the projects for the Carlisle Bay, whole Carlisle Bay development with condos, whatever. And this is an ideal thing for Barbadians overseas to invest in. I mean, they can come home, they can timeshare condominiums and stuff like this in the future.
Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that I wanted to touch on is that there were issues that existed for us and challenges before COVID. I think, because it's so present, of course it's a health issue, it's so present of mind, but we still, before COVID, we were dealing with poverty alleviation, we were dealing with climate change. How is Barbados fitting into that and looking at how we are being affected by those issues?
And this is part of the whole thing that we expect will be discussed in the UNCTAD, the whole idea of vulnerability. You just highlighted all of them: poverty, debt, health issues. Countries like Barbados, limited access to concessional funding because we have been graduated based on our level of GDP per person, whereas there are all of those other things that you mentioned and are not taken into consideration and are affected. And certainly this is an issue that we've been battling with. You recognize that during the lockdown, poverty had to be dealt with. We provided debit cards for persons, families, $600 a month. We did, and with the assistance of the private sector, we were able to provide food for a number of families. Even this year, we went as far as almost 100,000 food hampers to families. It is very difficult. I am particularly concerned, and I was a former Minister of Health and also chaired the subcommittee on COVID. And my concern has always been, and especially now, in that the focus is on COVID. Globally, we have seen people, they call it deaths not necessarily because of COVID, having the persons have it, but related to COVID in that vital resources in health sectors, and I think in England they documented that they might have had as many as 80,000 deaths, because diversion of scarce of health resources, because you need to have your intensive cares, your nurses, your staffing, the focus is on COVID. And a number of other diseases are neglected, and this is something that we've been battling in Barbados. I believe we've had one or two issues, but we've not reached that stage because we are plagued with the chronic diseases, hypertension and diabetes. And I think it was a very good decision to outfit the Harrison's Point. I think a number of countries are battling, so we can see it in Jamaica, we see it in the French Islands, where their main hospitals have been utilized for hospitalization of persons who are very ill with COVID, and then there are no beds for persons who need care, not as acute, but not nevertheless life-threatening. In Barbados, thus far, we've been able to put those persons in Harrison's Point, and we've been expanding it in terms of providing what we call primary and secondary, which is intensive care and a sort of step-down facility to do that, to ease the burden. Having said that, you still need nurses and other persons to look after those persons, and it is a delicate balance. Yeah. You don't want to strip the QH of its resources, human resources, but you want to maintain care and attention for persons in Harrison's. And to my mind, that is the difficult balance. I hear about people talking about the long lines to be tested and waiting for results, but for me, that is concerning. But the real thing is to make sure that we get that right, that we can still manage in our tertiary health institution, the QH, we can still provide care for persons who need care and who are not suffering from COVID.
Yeah.
So it is a difficult road to walk.
In the minute that we have left, what other details you would like to add and impress upon Barbadians?
Related to UNCTAD.
Related to anything you want.
There's so many things. As it relates to UNCTAD, I want them to think positively about it and really know that this is going to benefit Barbados in terms of our prominence on the world stage, and in terms of our ability to push our agenda and the agenda of developing countries, smaller and developing states. And certainly we expect that there will be benefits for us in the long run. As it relates to COVID, I implore Barbadians to adhere to the tenets, wear their masks, hand washing, social distancing, and of course to those who have not been vaccinated yet, to go and get vaccinated, because all the evidence shows that the person who is vaccinated stands a better chance in terms of survival and illness than those who are non-vaccinated. And even here, statistics show that well over 80% of those who go to Harrison's Point are unvaccinated. The other concern is that the more people unvaccinated, the more likelihood of a new variant. And only this morning we're hearing that the Mu variant, has been identified in another country in the Caribbean. So these things we need to be careful. I know Barbadians speak and compare and speak about countries like Jamaica and it's happening. And I get the feeling when I go around Barbados that somehow we feel that we are immune to this. It is all outside and not here, and it is not. It is here and it is real.
Yeah.
That's it.
Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
Thank you too. It's my pleasure.